Hey, how's it going? So, I'm interested in talking about American diplomatic efforts as of late. Because you might have heard that Emmanuel Macron and Ursula von der Leyen went to Beijing. They went by separate flights. It was pretty interesting because, see, there had been a long standing invitation on the part of Beijing for Emmanuel Macron to go to China. And so he took the opportunity to go during this period in the Ukraine conflict when things are going very, very badly for the West. And so he went, and Ursula decided that she was going to go too, like a tag along kind of thing. And the Chinese, to the EU commissioner, right? They made her arrive at the normal arrival area for just some random tourist. I mean, she actually had to, hand in her passport and do her security check, which is just a grotesque insult to this woman. And insofar as Macron was concerned, Xi, welcomed him, diplomatically, politely, right, and listened to his bullshit. And, that happened just a few days ago. A few days ago also, Richard Burns, the former head of the CIA, flew out to Saudi Arabia basically to chew out the Saudis for making peace with Iran, which quite clearly the Americans don't like peace breaking out in the Middle East, right? And then there's a third little data point whereby Anthony Blinken, who has been relentlessly trying to get in touch with the Chinese, and the Chinese are basically not taking his calls. Well, Anthony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, is flying to Hanoi in Vietnam, of all places. And, he's basically trying to stir up trouble between the Vietnamese and the Chinese. Macron went to China to convince the Chinese not to be friends with the Russians, right? And Burns flew to Riyadh to convince Mohammed bin Salman to not make nice with the Iranians. I mean, there's a pattern developing here, see? The West, what are they doing? They're trying to sow division. That's what they're doing. They're doing it in China. They're doing it, between the Chinese and the Russians. Blinken is going to go next week to Vietnam to sow division between Vietnam and China. Burns went to Saudi Arabia to sow division between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Huh? And what does this all tell you? That diplomatically, the United States is just thrashing around and trying to create chaos any way that it can. It's not trying to build bridges. Now, think of it like on a human level. Imagine you have some, uncle who goes around in your family trying to turn people against one another, right? To turn your parents against one another, to turn you against one of your cousins or whatever. I mean, how are you going to view that uncle? That uncle, let's call him Sam. How are you going to view this Uncle Sam, who's just trying to sow divisions and make everybody's life miserable because he believes that he stands to gain from this? You think that the other people in your family are not going to realize what's going on? You think the other people in the family aren't going to say to themselves, hey, this guy's just a troublemaker? You think the other people in your family are going to say, oh yeah, Uncle Sam, let's not invite him over for Thanksgiving dinner? No, what do you say? It's just an idea. What do you all say? You see my point. Because ultimately, diplomatic efforts are always about people. The people who are interacting, the diplomats. That's why it's so important to pick your diplomats very, very carefully. You want people who are conciliatory, who build bridges, not who sow division. But the entire American diplomatic corps, it seems, at least the senior people, and yes, I know that Emmanuel Macron is not a U.S. citizen or a U.S. diplomat, but he's functioning as one, and so is Ursula von der Leyen. So, you see my point? But anyway, diplomats are supposed to bring people together to iron out their differences. But the United States is just trying to spread chaos. And the rest of the world is wising up to this. I mean, that old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, right? The rest of the world is understanding that the United States is an agent of chaos. They also recognize that all of these diplomatic efforts are efforts made out of a position of weakness. You don't try to divide and conquer when you're strong. You don't have that need. Well, the Americans are doing it. Now, what does this mean? It means that very quickly, the West is going to be even further isolated. And when I speak of the West, I'm talking about the global American empire that encompasses Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. And let's not kid ourselves. That's the global American empire. And it's a global American empire led by a cosmopolitan class that cares nothing for the people of Europe, the people of North America, or the people of Oceania. They are people who are hell-bent for leather on causing as much division, as much chaos as possible, because they see their position as slippy. They see that the global American hegemon is no longer the undisputed global power. In fact, it's starting to appear that it's very much a case of the emperor's new clothes. That all the economic power and military power that the global American empire wielded in the past is kind of like gone. They can't scrounge up, artillery shells for the conflict here in Ukraine. So what does that tell you? Or more importantly, what does it tell all the countries in the rest of the world? It tells the countries in the rest of the world two things. Number one, the Americans just want to cause chaos because their positions is deteriorating, number one. And number two, they're looking at the Eurasian alliance between Russia and China. And they see how the Russians are bringing the Turks and the Syrians together, how the Chinese are putting the Iranians and the Saudis together, how the Chinese are trying to export prosperity to their region in Asia and also to other non-aligned nations in Africa, in South America, and Central America. They see that. And they want to do less and less. They want to have less and less of a relationship with the United States. They want to detach themselves even further. And this goes to the issue I discussed a couple of days ago about the de-dollarization going on around the world. The rest of the world understands perfectly well that the American economic system has them by the short hairs. And so as they see the United States diplomatic efforts being more towards dividing people and creating enmity where none existed before, they're going to start to say, hey, we don't want to be allied to those people, and we want to de-dollarize because, as I mentioned in that previous video post, the United States on a whim can decide to cut you off from their economic system, which can wreak havoc on your economic system. So you want to get away from the dollar and get into the yuan, the rupee, the ruble, if only for self-preservation, because you know that the Eurasian alliance of Russia and China, they're stable. They're not going to be capricious. If they have a problem with you, you'll know about it long before anything really important or serious happens to your economy. They're going to tell you. They're going to tell you if they have a problem with you, they'll reach out to you diplomatically and try to smooth things out long before the issue that they might have with you becomes an actual problem. Whereas the Americans go from 0 to 11 at the drop of a hat. You decide to pass some very reasonable law that you don't want your children to be indoctrinated with all kinds of sexual decadence, right? And you are on the good list of the Americans, but you try to pass this very simple and straightforward law that the vast majority of your people are totally in favor of, and all of a sudden they start talking sanctions. They start talking about stealing your sovereign wealth fund. They start creating, reaching out to the most destructive elements within your civil society to overthrow your government. The rest of the world isn't stupid. The United States, as I've said a number of times, is going down the tubes. What's remarkable is how quickly it's all falling apart. And right now they are relying on their tried and true method of sowing chaos and division where none previously existed. Pretty soon you're going to have them going from just, trying to do these diplomatic efforts at cleaving and dividing people into just outright sanctioning them. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The next target on the Americans' list is Saudi Arabia. They're going to start making moves against Saudi Arabia, with some color revolution perhaps, or perhaps with something a lot more violent and immediate. You wait. That's what's coming. Understand what's going on.